if someone wanted to, make out with me at a party or, something like that, I would just do it because that was what they wanted. And I was just kind of, responding to stimuli, not really making decisions for myself. Um, so there was definitely this sense of like, I may not remember the last interaction I had with this person. Uh, if I did, I may not realize how that fits into the overarching, like, broad picture of things. Um, and even later on, in future relationships, I did have someone who said, "Hey, the symptoms that you go through are too difficult for me to handle. Like, I don't think I can be with someone that is a stroke survivor."
This is Recovery After Stroke with Bill Gasiamis, helping you go from where you are to where you'd rather be.
Bill from recoveryafterstroke.com. This is episode 89, and my guest today is Eric Hinwood. Eric is an actor, director, producer, editor, model, and all-round nice guy. Eric experienced 2 strokes at the age of 19, and 6 years on is doing well and making great progress on the recovery. Just before the interview gets started, did you know that you can now download all the words of any of the Recovery After Stroke podcast episodes as a PDF? It's perfect if you prefer to read and take notes or highlight different parts of the interview for future reference. It's a great way to learn and helps retain new information to memory. Just go to recoveryafterstroke.com, click on the image of the episode you have just listened to, and at the very beginning of the page, you will see a button that says Download Transcript. Click the button, enter your email address, and the PDF will begin to download. Also, a few weeks ago, I launched the Recovery After Stroke coaching. People who have signed up are now being coached by me and are being helped to overcome challenges, including fatigue and anxiety, amongst other things. So if you are a stroke survivor that wants to know how to heal your brain, overcome fatigue, and reduce anxiety, Recovery After Stroke coaching might be perfect for you. If you have fallen in the cracks between hospital and home care and desire to gain momentum in your recovery but do not know where to start, this may be where I can help. I will coach you and help you gain clarity on where you are currently in your recovery journey. I will help you create a picture of where you'd like to be in your recovery 12 months from now, and I will coach you to overcome what's stopping you from getting to your goal. Want to know more? Just send an email to bill@recoveryafterstroke.com and I will arrange a time to speak with you in person about how Recovery After Stroke coaching can work for you. Now it's on with the show. Eric Hinwood, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, great to be here.
Great to have you here, man. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really, really appreciate it. When I come across people that talk about what they do and really sort of share with the world all the amazing things that they're doing, and then at the bottom they say, "I'm also a stroke warrior," that really touches me, and I need to connect. I need to find out more about that person. So tell me a little bit about what happened to you.
So I had kind of an unusual stroke experience. I was 19 when I had 2 strokes. So I won't get into too much of the details of it, but basically, there was an accident. I fell off a cliff. I ended up fracturing my skull. Ended up with a subarachnoid hemorrhage and an intraparenchymal hemorrhage. I believe are the 2 types of strokes that I had. And it kind of wreaked some havoc on my body. I used to be half an inch taller before the fall. I lost half the hearing in my left ear. I let's see what else. I lost 40 pounds. I was about 167 going into the hospital and about 127 leaving. Lost about half the blood in my body. I had organ failure. It was, quite an experience.
Wow,
But
man. I feel like this is it's a miracle that you're here, even, right?
yeah, I'm not really sure how I'm here. Doctors weren't either. There was a moment when they said, if he makes it through the night, we'll be very surprised. Um, and here I am. I guess almost 6.5 years later. So,
Yeah, man, good to have you here. What did your parents go through with all of this? Was there loved ones in your family that needed to deal with this? And like, what was that all about? Now that you have had time to reflect, at the time, I'm sure you would have been out of it, but what was it like for them?
yeah, I kind of had to, I guess, piece together what happened from different people, trying to get the big picture. I ended up writing it down, so I had like, this is what happened in the part of my life that I don't remember.
Yeah,
But basically, my parents stayed at the hospital with me for the time that I was there. It was 6 days total, and my dad immediately had to go back to work because trying to pay for everything. Insurance didn't cover. Um, well, it covered a lot, but not nearly enough.
yeah,
Um, and the kind of unfortunate thing that is kind of unique to my experience is, unfortunately, my mother was a drug addict, and so I was in a unique situation of, after returning home, um, she was using some of my medication as well as giving it to me at times. And when I went into the neurologist a couple weeks later on, they said that if I was a minor, this would have been felony level malpractice. I guess neglect. And I almost died because I ended up detoxing in the like a 3 weeks. I guess it would have been about 3 weeks after the initial strokes. So a lot of my first experience back was, how do I get out of this house? How do I get back to school? Which was, I was in college at the time, sophomore.
yeah.
So
See,
um, yeah.
people who are listening who have not apparently had anything happen to them in their lives and they've never had a problem. I mean, don't judge people at all. We never ever know what people go through, do we? And stroke survivors are no different to any other human on the planet. They're still going through regular stuff, daily issues with family, friends, whomever in life. And it doesn't stop just because you had a stroke. People don't just feel sorry for you and forget to be you know, nasty to you or talk aggressively to you or take things from you, or it just doesn't stop when you have a stroke and you've got to deal with all of the regular stuff and stroke, right?
Yeah, I what I've noticed is that because I was so young and because my physical recovery was as good as it is, a lot of people seem to discount what I've gone through. Like, oh, it's yeah, I've had two strokes, but oh, you seem fine now. Like, you seem coherent, you seem able to do things. Whereas they don't realize that just under the surface, I'm dealing with things like late onset PTSD because of the accident, and different things like that that continue to affect me every day. Energy levels, motivation, things like that.
Yeah.
Stuff that, because it's considered more mental health than physical health, people really just try to ignore it or just push past it, is what I've noticed.
Yeah. And you're shorter as well.
Right. Yeah, that extra half inch, I didn't think I'd notice it, but I used to be taller than my dad and he's taller than me.
Man, I'm glad we can laugh about that, but it's true. People don't see, they see the visual. They see everything looks good on the outside. They expect that the inside is just as good. And we're going through my sister-in-law's dad just had a stroke maybe 6 weeks ago,
Mm,
and the family has been through it with me, and yet they still ask the same questions that they asked back then or make the same statements that they asked back then. And
mhm,
I found myself yesterday at dinner being a little bit short with my wife and saying stuff like, no, 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 stop, don't say that. That's not what he needs. He doesn't need more of that. He needs less of
mhm,
that. And it still takes people by surprise that they are completely oblivious to the stroke survivor and how they're experiencing the world now that they're dealing with this brain that's healing. And this person is trying to get back on his feet. He's trying to get use of his right arm again, and he's lacking the motivation. And it appears that he's lacking the motivation, but I'm certain that it's got way more to do with, energy levels and the cognitive processing of getting up and using his leg again and learning how to use his arm again. But he doesn't have the words to communicate that back to his family and loved ones. So they just assume that it's lack of motivation, or he's being lazy, or being grumpy, or being set in his ways.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think that a lot of people, they'll see the average stroke survivor and look at them as the average human unless they know better. They won't see, or they won't be aware, or they won't even try to become aware of the differences. Um, in the also that certain differences can be unique to certain individuals.
Yeah.
Like for me, because mine was grouped together with that whole accident happening. I have digestive tract issues. Getting calories into my body is a difficult experience. I don't feel hunger or the need to go to the bathroom the way that most people do. So things like that is just like, oh, well, even if you're familiar with people that have had strokes, you would never know that without asking about it. So I think that is one of the other issues, is that strokes will affect people in different ways. They'll, depending on where it is in the brain, depending on what else happened around it, all of that.
Yeah, I've had conversations with stroke survivors. This is probably going to be episode 88 or 89 or something like that.
Mhm.
That have um, that have no concept of intimacy, zero. It just doesn't exist anymore. There's no,
Mm.
they're not missing it because they don't have it. I've met stroke survivors personally who lost, half their body weight because they don't feel hunger anymore at all, and they,
Yes, I don't feel hunger either. That's something I experience.
yeah, there you go, right? And this person told me that they eat when other people eat just so that they can eat.
Mhm. Right, the habit, the time of this is when people eat. Well, I guess that's when I should be with these people eating, because it seems like it's normal. It seems like, yeah, that's just when it happens. Yeah, but creating a situation where you're eating alone for yourself without it seeming like, oh, this is when this should happen. Yeah, it can be difficult. Yeah, it's
Wow,
interesting.
you could be a ketosis warrior as well. Like, you could tell people, you could run courses and sell stuff, about like, I just don't eat, man, because I don't need to.
Yeah, really. The funny thing though that I do like is my dad. He's a non-insulin dependent diabetic. So the one cool thing is I'm very aware of diets and what people should and shouldn't be putting into their body. Also, the stroke diets, that sort of thing. So I am luckily aware of, like, this is what I should be putting in if I can actually do it.
Yeah.
um, so I'm glad to have learned more about things that I was just previously. I never thought I'd need to know this, but now, becomes more
Yeah.
important.
So do you feel hunger? You don't feel hunger, I beg your pardon, but do you feel fullness when you begin to eat? Do you kind of feel like I've had enough?
Um, so my brain, it seems like it replaced four specific things. It replaced the feeling of hunger with, I guess maybe the best way I could describe it is like a hollow pain kind of feeling. Um, like something's missing on the inside and it hurts and you're not sure what it is. I've kind of tried to train myself like, hey, this is hunger. That's what hunger feels like. That means you need to go eat food, because it doesn't seem to have that automatic, if hungry, then eat, um, I guess, equation that I had before. Um, Fullness is more just like, kind of, imagine a balloon that's too full. Like I almost have that sort of feeling on the inside, but it's also a pain sensation. Uh, and Nausea. That's the other way that I know that I'm either full or need to go poop or things like that. Um, So yeah, it does seem like certain feelings that I wouldn't have had anymore. It seems like my brain found new routes, new ways to tell me what's going on, because otherwise I probably would have needed adult diapers. And I'm
Right.
very glad that I didn't have that situation, because that would be another whole complexity.
Let me give you a bit of an insight into the gut. So the gut has neurons in it as well, just like the head, right? Are you
Hmm.
aware of that?
I know, I wasn't actually.
Okay, so the gut has the same amount of neurons that a cat's brain has.
Huh.
So it's
Wow.
quite an intelligent organ, and it does things for us like it gives us, that gut feeling that something's not right.
Hmm. Yeah.
Have you ever said, um, I haven't got the guts to do that"?
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I've heard the expression.
So we have these expressions where we refer to our gut a lot, like I took gutsy action.
Hmm.
So when you're referring to that part of your body in conversation about how you're taking action and doing things, what you're doing is you're accessing the intelligence of your gut, and you're giving information to your brain about why you may or may not be taking certain action or doing certain things or able to absorb certain bits of information, etc. And the fact that the gut has neurons, um, we can retrain the gut just like we can retrain the brain through neuroplasticity. It also has neuroplasticity.
Wow.
And there's this amazing book called Embraining, using your multiple brains to do cool stuff, that if you looked into and read, talks specifically about the intelligence of the gut brain. And then it also talks about the heart brain, which has the same similar types of neurons. And it talks about the head brain, and it talks about how we use them together instead of separately, and how they all interact with each other to help us make decisions, do things, just be ourselves. Um, so there's a possibility, what I'm saying, and I'm not a scientist or a doctor, and nobody should take anything I say seriously. Um, but there is a possibility that with time, you'll be able to retrain your belly and your gut to be able to understand those things that it's not understanding at the moment about hunger, about fullness, about time to poop.
Oh, sounds like I've got some reading to do, because I haven't heard of that book or about that before.
Yeah.
That's really
So
cool.
have a look at that book, and then for people listening who also might be interested in this topic, check out for the book called "The Second Brain," and I'll make a list of these books in the show notes so that people can go to them easily, and I'll send you, Eric, an email at the end, and give you some food for thought there, mate.
Cool. Yeah, sounds great. Thank you.
But at 19, life is starting to peak. You're starting to discover your things about yourself. You're getting independent. Uh, you're out and about, and you end up having this dramatic incident. What is it like for you to experience all the things that you experienced, and what are you thinking about in the short term about all the challenges that from the challenges that you're overcoming and facing? What's it like for you at 19 to go through such a traumatic experience?
Um, well, I think my experience of it was almost like an autopilot. It felt like I was just going through the motions, following whatever was seemed like was supposed to be happening. I would just follow a conversation wherever it was headed, follow a group of people I was with wherever they were going. It was very much reactionary lifestyle compared to how I had been before. I wasn't coming up with new ideas on my own. I wasn't thinking, well, do I think this would be a good idea? It was, well, let me bounce this off of anyone in the room and take a general group consensus of, is this a good idea? That kind of thing. Um, and it took a few years for me to get mental clarity back. I'd say until maybe around like late 2016, so maybe 3 years. And during that time, there's all sorts of moments where I'm like, wow, I wish I had been clearer there, where I wish I had understood what this person was feeling at that time, because I was still in classes, trying to keep relationships going, trying to, get places in a career. Unfortunately, a creative career because I work in filmmaking. So, um, it made it all the more difficult. But yeah, I guess that was kind of what my experience was like. Um, I also had a time constraint because before I had the accident, I had planned to study abroad, um, and that flight was supposed to leave in June of that year. And so I had been given you have kind of a 25% chance of making it through the next 6 months. If you make it through that window, your chances of making it to like 25, 30, that increases. But they told me like before leaving the hospital, like, if you make it to retirement age, that will be insane. Like if you, make it to one of the big ones was 25, and I've passed that now. So that's, I'm very happy about that. Um, but um, but I left before the 6 months were up to go overseas because I kind of had this decision. Well, if they're telling me if I see a sunrise, I may not see that sunset. Um, I'm gonna go overseas and have a good time. So that was a kind of like a goal of mine that I just make it through this time, and then I go over there, and then maybe I get to come back. We'll see.
Well, I think that's a great thing that you did that. In that, that's a great thing to aim for. So you're setting yourself up for achieving an outcome and getting there and making it. And I think that helps you by default do the right things about your recovery so that you can get to that point where you're good enough to go. And then if you're good enough to go and you're having an amazing time, that's really going to make a difference on your mindset. It's really going to make a difference on how your body feels, and all the amazing neurochemicals that are in your body and how they're going to help heal the brain, because it's starting to feel like perhaps there's light at the end of the tunnel. That's a positive outlook. That seems like it was a solid move to make that decision to go anyway.
Yeah, I guess it did kind of give me that motivation of, you'll end up in Europe if you can make it through this. You can get to have this experience that you've wanted before. Although the one kind of interesting thing I was going through at the time was kind of a sense of the person that this accident happened to wanted this before the accident. I should do that because that's what they would have wanted. Almost seeing myself as a unique individual,
Wow.
which was kind of odd, but it made sense because I woke up in a body where the legs were different lengths. I was a different height. I was different weight. It really did kind of almost feel like a reincarnating into a body with the same face kind of idea. It was very odd.
So a massive identity shift. You've moved from this clear, different person, say at 19 prior to this accident, to this new version, different person afterwards. And you decided to do the right thing by the other guy and help that guy fulfill his dreams.
uh, Kind of, yeah. That was kind of the first maybe 2.5 years was very much reactionary, and how would I have done this before? Let me try to recreate who this person was, until the mental clarity started to come back, like I said, around like 2016, 2017. I started to think, well, what would I want now, now that I do have the ability to process this mentally, to think about this and come to my own conclusions, and to trust my conclusions a little bit more than I did, within the first year of the accident. It allowed me to kind of expand and begin to grow in a way that I don't think I had been before.
Yeah. So the trip then would have taken that growth and that expansion to the next level. You're overseas now. You're, some time beyond your uh, injury, and your recovery is on the way. And now you're in this completely new place that you've never experienced before. What was it like having that new experience while you were there?
Well, it was pretty incredible, because one of the things that had really been an everyday situation while I was in the U.S. Was working out. Before I left the hospital, they had given me a very, very intense workout regimen, and they had me 2 hours a day, 6 days a week in the gym, and 3 days a week running, 15 minutes each day. But every week I had to add 15 minutes to the total time. So the second week would be 30 minutes, 3 days a week, and then 45 minutes, 3 days a week, until I reached 4.5 hours. Um, so I was basically running like a half marathon 3 days a week at that point, because they had said that marathon runners had the highest chance of surviving my type of stroke, of my type of injury.
Wow.
Um, so they had put me on a real difficult workout routine for the first 6 months. But going overseas, that time was over. The workout routine was over. I was able to kind of then have more of a exploratory lifestyle than I had before. It was very routine before that.
Was running harder because you mentioned that you had a difference in the length of your legs?
Right. So I was in a walker for about the first month, transitioned to a cane, and then eventually to walking on my own after that. And I do think running was um, one of the most helpful things in allowing me to walk without a limp and to walk more normally. Because even if there had been muscles that were greatly weakened or atrophied by the weight loss, different things, um, I was able to help regrow and to feel more normal, even if like my hips are one's higher than the other, things like that. Um, I was able to, I guess, to figure out how does this body run, you know, over time.
Yeah, right. Cool. That's I'm listening to all this stuff and to me it seems to me like you were in really good hands medically, and a lot of how far you've come has got a lot to do with you. It's got a lot to do with your need to solve problems and overcome things and find new ways, which is, I think, is really amazing. If a stroke survivor can have a problem solving attitude, they're going to be able to uh, overcome more things than by waiting around for other people to solve their problems for them. Do you relate to that? Would you call yourself a curious problem solver?
Definitely, yeah. I spent a lot of time just Googling and researching and finding out more about the situation. That's how I learned about the marathon runners thing. That's how I found out about avoiding things like alcohol, tobacco, high amounts of caffeine. Things that I didn't realize could be things that could cause a stroke, or that could, because at 19 I wasn't prepared for, I wasn't looking out for like, oh, gotta prevent a stroke. Um, but I will say, because after I left the hospital, I had a couple appointments, but I only saw a neurologist one time. Um, I had the accident December 27th, 2013. I saw one other neurologist in January, and that was the last neurologist I saw before leaving to go overseas.
If you've had a stroke and are in recovery, you'll know what a scary and confusing time it can be. You're likely to have a lot of questions going through your mind, like, how long will it take to recover? Will I actually recover? What things should I avoid in case I make matters worse? Doctors will explain things, but obviously because you've never had a stroke before, you probably don't know what questions to ask. If this is you, you may be missing out on doing things that could help speed up your recovery. If you're finding yourself in that situation, stop worrying and head to recoveryafterstroke.com, where you can download a guide that will help you. It's called 7 Questions to Ask Your Doctor About Your Stroke. These 7 questions are the ones Bill wished he'd asked when he was recovering from a stroke. They'll not only help you better understand your condition, they'll help you take a more active role in your recovery. Head to the website now, recoveryafterstroke.com, and download the guide. It's free.
so that whole 6 month period, I was doing the physical therapy workouts. I was doing that on my own, unassisted. I was They had told me that they had wanted to do MRIs every 2 weeks to see whether my brain was filling with blood or whether it was decreasing, but we couldn't afford that. So it really was, after a certain point, just figure it out. And just, can you Google it? Can you find the answers? Is there someone you can call that might be able to give you the answers? No, then good luck. So
Uh,
it definitely was that type of lifestyle. Yeah.
I'm I live in a bit of a bubble. In Australia, we have an amazing healthcare system. If you don't have insurance, the public system provides everything. And I hear things like we couldn't afford an MRI,
Mhm.
and that just throws me. Like I don't know how to respond to that. It's so bizarre to hear that from the part of the world that we live in. There's no such thing as you can't afford an MRI. Somebody just orders an MRI and it's done, and the public system pays for that.
Right.
What other things couldn't you afford that you had to go without that were potentially critical to your recovery?
Um, well, I since leaving the hospital, I've never been to a physical therapy appointment, an occupational therapy appointment. Um, it was 6 years before a neurologist looked at my previous records and talked to me, today. Um, so there was a lot of things. Um, I mean, I couldn't afford a hearing aid. I didn't get my first hearing aid until I believe it was late 2018, early 2019. So like 5 years after the accident itself. Um, as it was around $300,000 for the time I spent in the hospital and the associated fees. I did have medical insurance at the time, and that still left me with $67,000 that I was unable to pay. I ended up applying for a need-based, medical aid program, and was able to. I got accepted for that due to, I believe it's just due to income. So I was able to get some of that taken care of. But yeah, if I hadn't had insurance, if I hadn't been able to receive that help from the program that I applied to, it really would have ruined my life financially as well as medically. It was, yeah, quite difficult.
They get that they help somebody survive a stroke, and then they give them a $300,000 bill.
Yeah, yeah.
What's the point
As a
of helping
19
them
year old,
survive it? Just let him go. Forget about it.
you know, I had that thought myself, but
That's, I know. I would too. I mean, that's so cruel to do that to people. And I know that you guys in the States don't have another solution for that. And there's often many people that are going through that. I know I speak to a lot of people that go through that. It just seems such a stupid system to heal people and then, or try and heal people and then hit them with a $300,000 bill. You're undoing all the good work that you just did in healing them.
right? Yeah, because if I had been in a country that had, coverage like you did, or like a lot of the Western European countries, or Scandinavian countries, things like that, I would have had continued care for the next, maybe 3 months afterwards to get me to a more stable place and position. But yeah, that just wasn't, in the U.S. as things are currently. Not to get political, hopefully things change, and that won't be the case forever.
Yeah.
But currently, yeah, that's how things are, unfortunately.
I had I had a choice whether I still have a choice whether I take out insurance or whether I just go via the public system.
Mhm.
And I choose the public system. I pay taxes that cover that, and our taxes are quite high, and we pay a goods and services tax and all sorts of taxes. And I whinge about the taxes, but when I needed to be helped and I needed brain surgery, when I went to hospital, no one ever said to me, Where are your insurance papers? Do you have a credit card? Nobody ever said anything. They just said, this is the problem.
Wow.
We need surgery. It's booked in for 2 weeks' time. And that's it. You never heard from anybody about money ever again. And then physical therapy lasted for a month. And then physical therapy at home lasted for 6 months, a couple of days a week. And then physical therapy out of home, where I was going to physical therapy, that was costing me like $3 a session or $4 a session.
That's incredible.
You know what I mean? So I live in a really privileged part of the world, and I live in this bubble of strokes, something that we can go to hospital for and get fixed for, etc. But it's not the case for everybody. And I suppose why I'm going on about this a little bit is because I just want to bring attention to it, and I think it's wrong. And I'm not sure what the solution is. It's definitely beyond my influence. Being able to change the way that things happen in a country like the United States, but definitely needs to be more spoken about it, because I'm talking about stroke, but this is happening to people that are recovering from all sorts of issues all over the place. And everyone who has to recover from something has to stop working. So their ability to
Right.
actually come up with money decreases because of the fact that they're unwell.
Yeah, that was also an issue for me. Is that so I had been paying for school myself and just working to pay for it, and that was definitely made quite a bit more difficult by the fact that I also had to figure out what was going on with me medically and handle all that on top of work and school.
Yeah, man. I get inspired more and more when I listen to stroke survivors who, tell a story like you do, and many of them that I've interviewed tell a similar story, that they've overcome so much. They've found ways to resolve their problems. They've been creative in coming up with solutions. And I think that more stroke survivors need to hear from people like you, so that they know that there is a way, and they can reach out to other people about how to find a way to overcome some of these problems. Um, the other thing that people struggle with is relationships. Tell me about, how does a 19-year-old deal with relationships of the intimate kind, but also friends? How did that all change for you, and how is it now different to what it was like then?
So it was very difficult. I'll just say that right off the bat. Um, my experience was, here's the unfortunate bit. uh, I don't remember this, but during the time after I had left the hospital before returning to school, there was about a month time period there. Um, an ex girlfriend had come to see me, and we had gotten back together. I guess in one of those, like, oh, this, almost lost this person. This person means more to me than I thought they did, kind of idea. I assume. Unfortunately, I was unaware of that I was with this person. Um, and living as much of a reactionary lifestyle as I did, if someone wanted to, make out with me at a party or, something like that, I would just do it because that was what they wanted. And I was just kind of, responding to stimuli, not really making decisions for myself. Um, so there was definitely this sense of like, I may not remember the last interaction I had with this person. Uh, if I did, I may not realize how that fits into the overarching, like, broad picture of things. Um, and even later on, in future relationships, I did have someone who said, "Hey, the symptoms that you go through are too difficult for me to handle. Like, I don't think I can be with someone that is a stroke survivor." And that was real hard. I didn't date for about maybe 2 years after that, of like, all right, I'm just going to focus on me and try to get these symptoms down. And maybe it's something that, maybe it was just that individual, but maybe it wasn't, so definitely changed things quite a bit.
So you're now questioning, like, what's wrong with me? Like, why wouldn't you date me? That's an interesting thing, because I've also met and spoken to stroke survivors whose partners left them after stroke.
Mhm.
Uh, some of them because they were already about to leave, or things were just rocky, and it was no reason to continue a relationship that was no good. Others um, were because they just couldn't handle it and they didn't understand what that meant for them, because people
Mhm.
in the caring capacity often also struggle a lot. So you can understand it, and I think we need to reserve judgment, but there's no doubt about it. It's traumatizing to the other person as well. And at 19, a 19-year-old partner, you can kind of understand it, really, can't you? It's like we've just met each other. It's probably not um, the deepest love ever, and maybe I need to just move on with my life and let that person move on with their life. Does that kind of ring any bells? Does that sound like it could have potentially been the case there?
Well, we were close. We had been dating since, I guess it would have been my junior year of high school. So it was like a 2-year relationship that we did try to make work with that. But yeah, that was kind of the end of things because it became an issue of, well, even if we had worked past, I could now remember things better and that sort of stuff. The trust was broken. Um, but I think one of the hardest things is getting someone who hasn't experienced traumatic brain injury of some sort or another, trying to get the idea that not remembering something doesn't have to do with how important it is to me, the way that it does for a lot of people. A
That's
lot
it.
of people have this sense of, well, if you forgot about it, then it really wasn't that important, and that is not the case with me in any way, shape, or form. And it's so difficult to convince other people that I actually forgot something I really cared about because I don't get to decide what I forget.
Yeah, that is very interesting. I reflect on the conversations that I had with my wife about who came to visit me, and often I would say to her, "Did such and such come and see me?" And I don't think they came and saw me. She said, "Well, they did. Everyone came and saw you. People travelled interstate to come and see you." And I said, "Like who?" And she would say a name, and I'm like, "Oh, really? Oh, I had no idea." So
Mhm.
yeah, it's really important for us to somehow get the message across that forgetfulness is common for regular folk, and for stroke survivors it just comes with the territory of being a stroke survivor. You're going to forget things. And I have a friend of mine who is probably 25 years post stroke. She had a stroke when she was 21 that was caused by an aneurysm that burst in her head. And one of the things that she does before she goes to bed every night, she has a little whiteboard next to her bed, and she writes things like, um, tomorrow is Monday. Monday is a work day. Go to work,
Mhm.
you know? And we laugh and smile about it, but she's been doing that from day one. Like, she's been doing that for 25 years. She has to make notes like that. Otherwise, she won't remember in the morning, or she won't have the processing capacity in the morning to remember that she's got to get ready and go to work.
Mhm. I kind of do something similar. I guess I think about it as like setting my intentions for the next day. I'll set reminders on my phone, like I'll set one for noon, and it'll be eat. I'll set one for 2 p.m. It'll be do push-ups. I'll set one for just little things that it's like, well, these are things that I would want to have happen tomorrow, and if I set reminders for myself now, then I can make that happen,
Yeah,
kind
well,
of thing. Um, but yeah,
it's
it is
interesting.
interesting.
It is so fascinating. Um, you've come a long way. You've overcome a heap of things. I imagine that stroke recovery is still ongoing. Um, what else do you do these days? What have you been able to achieve in other parts of your life?
Um, well, I'd say some of the biggest achievements or things that I'm proud of is I had run a Spartan race before having the stroke. And if you're unfamiliar with it, it's think of it like an obstacle course race that takes place over like 10-15 miles. Um, it's difficult, it's intense, and it was something that I had done after graduating high school, and I had decided that I needed to beat my time on that race after the stroke, and I was able to do it. Um, it was a 15-mile race. It was about 35 obstacles, and I was able to beat my time by, I think it was like 5 or 10 minutes. Um, so that was a big one for me. That was a, can I get to to a better physical level than I was at before the stroke, and
Yeah.
being able to say that yes, I can and have been able to do that. That was big for me. That meant okay, my body can recover.
Yeah.
Another big thing was my first feature film. I had written, directed, starred in it. Got that onto Amazon Prime. That was a big one.
What's it called?
Um, it's called Carpe Diem European Escapade,
Right.
and it was. I went to film school, film trade school for 2 years when I was in high school. So when I graduated high school, I had the trade school degree and the high school diploma. And my friends that I've been in film school with, we decided to do a trip that we've been saving up for a few years, take a camera and make a movie, and we did. So it was cool to finally see that be completed, be released. I guess the film stuff has been some big moments of, all right, I'm proud of this. I'm glad I was able to accomplish this. Um, Another thing that was actually a suggestion from a doctor was writing an autobiography. They thought that it could be really helpful for me to have my memories in order, to have a book that I could look back at and be like, what did I do in the summer of this year? Like, do I remember this? And to actually be able to say, like, oh yeah, I did this. And the side effect of that that's been positive is I've had a number of people that have also had strokes ask me, like, well, when are you going to release that book? Like, I'd love to read it, which is something I didn't think would be. I never considered that when I was writing it, that people would actually want to read it other than me. um, but yeah, those have been some things that I've been proud of. Um,
So is the book available?
Not at this point, still writing it.
Uh,
It's hard to know when to stop it, when it's like, well, I'm young. How do you put out an autobiography when you're only 25?
Wow, yeah, that's a good
But
question. Well, you just do it, and then in another
yeah,
25 years, you write the second
the
version.
sequel. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. um
And then when you're about 85, like some of our action hero actors, like Sylvester Stallone and Schwarzenegger, you release 10 more versions of every other thing you've ever done, just so that you can retire with another pocket full of cash, just because you might not be acting for too much longer.
yeah, really.
So
um,
good thing to look forward to, man. That'd be awesome to see that book happen. Um, because yeah, it is important, because there's not a lot of 19-year-old stroke survivors who get to write a book about their experience. Therefore, there's a whole demographic of people that would relate to you more than they would relate to a 45-year-old person who wrote a book about stroke.
mhm. Yeah, that was something that I noticed, because I go to like the stroke support meetings in Los Angeles County and stuff, and I find that I'm easily the youngest person there by 2 decades. I've never met anyone my age or close to it that's had a stroke. I know that they're out there, but I've never met one myself. Um, so it definitely is something that I would like to get that out there more. Um, and eventually, because I've done it with a short film, but I love to make a feature film as well that could spread awareness and be in some way related to the idea of brain injuries and that sort of thing.
Yeah, there's a couple of beautiful movies out there. I think they're both on Netflix. One of them is called The Butterfly Effect, I'm pretty sure.
Mm,
And the other one is called My Beautiful Broken Brain. And,
mm,
they talk to people The Butterfly Effect was written by somebody who I think experienced some really traumatic brain issue, and I think it was stroke. And they talk about that process that person went through. So it's done by somebody else. I feel like it's done by somebody else about this person's experience, and it's quite an older movie. And My Beautiful
Mhm.
Broken Brain is a documentary type of movie which follows this young lady who has experienced some neurological challenge, and she talks about, or attempts to talk about, the stuff that's going on inside her head, and
Mhm.
tries to bring that out so people can understand what the experience is like.
Mhm.
And there's definitely not enough of that material out there. You only hear about the two or three things often repeated that are out there. So, the more people that put out that type of content, I think the better for being able to bridge that gap between this unknown thing that we all go through after experiencing a stroke, and bring it into the mainstream so that people have a better understanding and more tools to be able to communicate and understand and support people that have had a neurological condition from any trauma, as well as, for the first time, and I don't know about you, but for the first time after experiencing my brain bleeds and then brain surgery, I got to understand what it was like to have a mental illness,
Mhm.
because I experienced isolation, I experienced depression for a small amount of time. I experienced that thing that people do when they mean well and say, "Oh, wow, you look great, actually, man," and then not knowing that actually I am not great.
Mhm.
So, um, did you have that experience as well? Did you start to be able to relate to people who had, uh, previously you had previously not taken notice of, like people in wheelchairs and people with other challenges?
Yeah, definitely. One of the biggest things that I didn't expect and didn't know was coming was late onset PTSD.
Yeah,
Which, when I Googled the type of stroke I'd had, I saw that it was, listed as one of the symptoms. Like, oh, this is a something people are aware of, but I wasn't, I wasn't ever told. I don't know. I guess it was just that I didn't see a doctor for so long afterwards, that I just wasn't aware. But I ended up enrolling in a PTSD clinical trial for, I guess it was a new medication they were testing for it, because I couldn't afford to see a normal doctor. I couldn't, go that route. So I had to become part of this clinical trial. And that was actually how I got the diagnosis that, hey, you do have PTSD, and depression and anxiety and the different things are, symptoms of that, which is itself a symptom of the strokes. So I definitely experienced, like, fear of leaving my room or house that I didn't know that people with anxiety can sometimes experience. I didn't know that, like, happiness and motivation are so interwoven and connected. Like, I didn't realize that it would affect my motivation when depression hits, things like that. So definitely gave me a new view on mental health, how we look at it, how we treat it, and how we treat people that are trying to better their mental health or struggling with it.
yeah. When you were told that, oh yeah, by the way, when you experience stroke, post-traumatic stress disorder might kick in, and when you have post-traumatic stress disorder, that might be anxiety. And when you feel anxiety, it is as a result of this. Did having those dots connected for you make it better and make it possible for you to be in anxiety and go, oh, okay, that's what this is. I'll just ride this out, and this will pass, and I'll be able to get that next thing that I need to do done. Did it help?
It definitely did, because then I could come up with tools that I could use to help myself. You know, when I didn't know what it was, this is a scary thing that I'm experiencing, and I don't know how to stop it, and I don't know what it is. Am I just going crazy? Like, what's going on here? And then to sit down and be like, okay, when PTSD causes depression symptoms, you need to get yourself outside. You need to get into sunlight. You need to listen to music. You need to surround yourself with people, you need to do certain things. When it's anxiety, you need to, you know, call a person, you need to open a window instead of locking all the doors in the house and, containing yourself, different. It gave me steps to take to get through these things rather than just wondering what these things are. So I'd say that was incredibly helpful.
Yeah. One of the every once in a while, quite often I post in Instagram at my Instagram page, Recovery After Stroke, and I ask stroke survivors what their three main challenges were when they were recovering from stroke, and they gave often there was many stroke survivors that gave many things. So I ended up making a list of about, I think it was about 15 challenges that people regularly face. But one of the main things that came up more and more was fatigue, headache, and anxiety were the three key things that people were talking about regularly experiencing after their stroke. And I had a little bit of anxiety that was based around noises. When I heard a lot of noise, when I was in a crowded place, overwhelm would cause anxiety, and I would want to avoid that situation. And if somebody listening and watching this is thinking that um, that's an issue for them, it's actually not an issue. Your body is telling you, like at the moment, for your brain, that is way too overwhelming. Get out of there. And it's really a great defense mechanism to get out of there and be not in a space where noise is overwhelming your brain and it's starting to hurt. And one of the other things that was an issue was light and sensitivity to light. And that used to cause trouble at night when it was time to wind down and go to bed. And light would affect me, keep me stimulated or more awake, or and as a result of that, what that would do is that would mean that I would have a bad night's sleep, and then the cycle of distress and anxiety and all those things would be easier to fall into because I was tired. Noise would make it worse, and light would make it worse quicker. So there was a whole host of things that if I intervened in the one place at the right time, it would stop that cycle from taking off and occurring again. What did you do to get out of those situations that you found were really difficult to deal with?
I'm always surprised by how similar certain experiences are between people that have had issues like we have. Because I also had the same thing of like, it seemed like my eyes just took forever to adjust to light. I'd walk outside, put sunglasses on, I'd have them on the whole time we're outside. My friends are like, it's not that bright out. I was like, but it is. And so one of my issues for that in regard to sleep was I sleep with blackout curtains. So I
Yes.
can have almost total, absolute, inky, pure black darkness when I sleep,
Wow.
and that's the only way I do it. And I put a fan on loud because I have tinnitus, and it's actually pretty bad. And that also helps with not hearing outside noises. It helps mask is the term they use for it, mask the tinnitus,
Yep.
and helps me not hear anything outside or outside of the room I'm in. So I find I close the door, I lock the door, I turn the fan on, I put the blackout curtains over the windows, and it gives me like a almost like a sensory deprivation chamber kind of idea of like this
Yep.
is how I can get to sleep. But it's interesting to hear you go through some similar things.
Yeah, sensory deprivation is a thing. Like, people are going into sensory deprivation chambers, floating chambers, and all that kind of thing to experience sensory deprivation because there's so much sensory input. A lot of our autonomic nervous system is overwhelmed. And when you're struggling with a stroke injury and recovering from that, it's overwhelmed to the next level. So, being able to give yourself some time and deprive yourself of some external influences is a really good thing. It helps the body to just calm down and heal. So it's great. Now, were you drawn to get blockout blinds, or like Was it instinctive? Like, how did you get to that point where you felt like, well, this is the right thing for me?
I guess it started when I realized that I could walk from outdoors to indoors without taking sunglasses off. Like I would be totally comfortable wearing sunglasses indoors, and something that I realized was unusual. And so I slowly started to come to this realization that I am more sensitive to light than I used to be, or not even that, just I'm sensitive to light. I don't know if I was that sensitive to light before or not. I don't really remember.
Yeah.
Because I have good knowledge of like events and memories, but I have very little knowledge of like how did I react to light in the past. I don't know. But I started realizing that I like things darker. If someone kept night lights on, I wouldn't be able to sleep. Like I would um, be the kind of person that was looking for more darkness. And so it just kind of led to, well, why don't I get thicker blinds that'll help me to not have, things shining in the window late at night or something.
That is just amazing to hear that, man. I had an interview early on in the podcast series before it was called Recovery After Stroke with a guy called Alex Fergus, and we spoke about light and how light interferes with uh, the body and sleep. And specifically, we spoke about things like artificial light at night. As the sun goes down, most of us switch on our lights so that we can get things done inside the home, but that's not what we did until just about 100 years ago when electricity was invented, and
Right.
the light globe was invented. So um, what that's done is that shifts a whole bunch of things. And he talked about uh, the different spectrums of blue light being the most uh, stimulating at night and needing to minimize the amount of blue light, and then increasing the amount of warm colored lights. And then the best colored light at night was the light that you see in fires, like like red light and orange light.
Mhm.
And this guy, he did him and his, well, he kind of made his girlfriend sort of come along for the ride. He decided that they would do at night, there would be no lights on in the house um, as soon as it went dark for a period of time. And he ended up using red lights inside the house, red light globes inside the house, just as night lights if necessary to, get up and go to the loo or, um, you know, get up for any reason. And that was a real fascinating conversation because he talked about exactly what you did about block out blinds. And he took it to the next level. When he traveled interstate or to another country and went to a hotel room, he would take sticky tape and stick sticky tape on the little lights from the alarm clock or from the air conditioning or from anywhere where there was a little light. And what he said, which was fascinating, and I've read into this a lot further since then, and the research, there's an abundance of research about it, is that the skin is what detects light before anything else. And you can influence the way a person's nervous system responds just by changing the color of light that you're pointing to the skin.
Wow.
So the
Huh.
eyes play a massive role. The eyes
Mhm.
play a massive role in, providing input from light, but then the skin also provides a massive amount of feedback to the body.
So that's interesting because I wasn't really aware of most of that, but I I realize that I do. Like I put both my computer and my phone into like night mode, where it does more of an orange than a blue light tone.
Yeah.
And I keep that on almost constantly. And when I go to bed, I'll light a candle and have that be the last thing that's on in the room before I go to bed. Instead of turning off a light switch, it's blowing out the candle, because that does just help me seem to like wind down to get closer to the ability to sleep because I have trouble sleeping. I think for me, the thing that brought me to the point of using the candle and being able to do that was one of my issues was figuring out what do I want? Like, what do I like? What do I enjoy? Like, what makes me happy in life? And so I started meditating, and I try to meditate, consistently every day if I can. And that was how the candle thing came about. It was just one of those moments of, what do I want out of life? What do I enjoy? What do I like? And something that I realized I liked was the sense of relief that I got in turning off an overhead light and putting on something smaller. And so that was my way to experience that. So I guess what it could mean for other stroke survivors is pay attention to what you like, because your body might be trying to tell you things about what you need.
It just seems to come in hand. I'm not sure why exactly. When we sit and watch TV in the evening for a couple of hours, perhaps, and it's gone dark, we've got lights on top of our head, and every single day I'll have to ask my wife to switch that off because I can't deal with the light on top of my head. It just feels too overwhelming.
Mhm.
And my screens are all set to night mode, and that really does help. And at one point after my stroke recovery, I probably spent a few months in orange glasses, in blue
Hmm.
blocking glasses, and I found that really helped me in my recovery, and also it helped me calm myself down and my brain down on the way to bed for a couple of hours
Wow.
before bed.
Huh.
So they cost $20 or something to buy, and basically they're just a tinge of orange. They're a really bright kind of orange looking, and when you pop them on, it just filters out that blue light and starts to allow you to get into your circadian rhythm and change the cycle back into, it's getting dark now. Let's start decreasing the amount of cortisol and increasing melatonin, and then moving towards sleep. So it's a fascinating conversation. Your story has been pretty amazing for me to hear. I haven't spoken to a lot of young stroke survivors, especially people that experienced a stroke at 19, two strokes like you did. Um, what else is coming up for you? Projects that you're working on, and with regards to the work that you do.
Let's see. Next things. So I have a feature film that I directed, that I'm currently editing. We're hoping to have that completed by this summer. It's about the Syrian refugee crisis.
All right.
Um, it's kind of Syrian refugee teenager gets brought into the U.S. illegally. What do you do with that? Where's the moral? What's the moral answer for this kind of idea? There's a lot of compare and contrast between uh, who we see as refugees and who we see as immigrants, and that sort of idea. So I'm passionate about that. Really hope that does well. Um, and then I was the director of photography for a horror movie called The Butcher that's on Amazon Prime now, and we're doing a sequel for that one coming up this summer. Um, those are maybe the next projects coming out that I'll be looking forward to. And then I have a couple of short films, small projects, other things that we're hoping will get places, but we still got a good amount of time left to go. A lot of filmmaking is juggling different projects and um, different aspects. One of them is post production, one's in production, one's in pre production, and you're just trying to make sure everything's still running.
Yeah, it seems like you need to be able to do many things at once.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Eric, man, it's been a real pleasure getting to know you, and getting to hear your story of recovery and survival. And it's just great that you went through something so traumatic and you're coming out the other side. And I'm really excited to know that you're 6 years out and you've got your whole life ahead of you, and you've passed the milestone that the doctor said if you pass that, that'll be great. You're looking like you're going to pass quite a few more milestones, man. And really appreciate you being on the podcast. If anyone wanted to get in touch with you, where would they go?
Well, also thank you for having me on the podcast. No, it's always happy to be a part of things like this and to try to spread awareness about what it is and how it affects people. If people want to get in contact with me, Facebook, Instagram, email. Really, the easiest way is just, it's my name, Eric Hinwood, EricHinwood. That's my handle for Instagram. That's my name on Facebook. That's my email address at gmail.com. Just use that name, put whatever you want after it, and then it'll get to me.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
All right. Thank you for having me. All right.
Man.
And thank you for helping me learn some new things, because I learned quite a bit as well.
Yeah, my pleasure. I mean, that's the reason I do the podcast. I do it so that hopefully we can bring ideas and information from people from all around the world, and we can share some information that will make a difference. I mean, I needed the help so bad. When I experienced the stroke in 2012, there was not much of this stuff happening yet online, and it seems to have taken off really amazingly now. And I can't do it without people like you. So if anyone watching out there or listening out there wants to be on the podcast, please get in touch, bill@recoveryafterstroke.com. Send me an email, ask me to be on the show, and I'd love to have you on there, just so that we can create our own community. We don't have to all be overactive in the community, but I feel like, if anyone wants to spend an hour on the podcast with me, that is going to make a massive difference, because people are going to be able to get to that episode forever, man. So I just appreciate it when people do that. And I really appreciate you for doing that and taking your time out for me, man.
I'm happy to, and hopefully people learn a little more and get help from as well.
Discover how to support your recovery after stroke. Go to recoveryafterstroke.com.